Well, good afternoon. I am Bob Barnhart, and I am the president of the Greater Lansing United Nations Association, also known as GLUNA. I welcome you to our 2021 Human Rights Day program. I am pleased to be here with this live audience and to share the program with those joining us via Zoom. I also want to thank our four sponsors, the MSU Muslim Studies Program, the MSU Asian Studies Center, the Islamic Center of East Lansing, and the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. For our audience here at the Islamic Center, just a couple of housekeeping items. A reminder that please wear your masks at all times. And restrooms for ladies will be down this hall. And for gentlemen, they're out this door here. So should you need them. Today's program is titled Uyghur Genocide: What can be done to stop China's crimes against humanity? Genocide is a very strong word with a set of legal determinants. Many governments around the world, including that of the US, are declaring that the mass atrocities against the Uyghur people in China's Xinjiang region constitute genocide. There are reports of slave labor, forced sterilization, separation of children from parents, and more. All these abuses are listed in the UN Genocide Convention of 1948. The Uyghur situation has raised several concerns about the ability of the UN to address such problems, including having access to see what's happening, member states in disagreement about the necessity of taking action, and the ability to serve justice through the international courts. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, has not yet been given a green light by China to see what is actually happening in the Xinjiang region after seeking access for over 3 years. We are fortunate to have with us this afternoon individuals who have experience with the Uyghur people and this dire situation to help us understand who we are talking about and to delve into the complexities faced by the international community. Now, due to security concerns, we will not be broadcasting our first speaker. Our Zoom audience will view videos pertinent to the Uyghur situation, while our in-person audience listens to our first speaker and asks a few questions. To our Zoom audience, I hope you understand our concerns, and we look forward to welcoming you back in about 15 minutes to hear from the two remaining speakers. We'd like to welcome back our Zoom viewers. I hope that you found the videos informative for you, and we're anxious now to share with you from our two remaining speakers. I would like at this point to welcome Elfidar Ilteber. She is the Secretary of the Uyghur American Association, located in Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Elfidar was born in Urumqi, China, and grew up in Istanbul, Turkey, until migrating to the United States in the year 2000. She has a BA in marketing from George Mason University and over 20 years of marketing and project management experience. She has taught the Uyghur language to US government employees, and as the daughter of a prominent Uyghur writer and journalist, is an active member of the Uyghur community and an outspoken human rights activist. She is currently a structure analyst and fluent in English, Uyghur, and Turkish. Elfidar, we welcome you now.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Assalamu alaikum. First, I would like to thank all the organizers for today's event, giving me the opportunity to talk about the Uyghur crisis, Uyghur genocide. First, let me introduce, you introduce me, but talk about a little bit about Uyghur American Association. It's a Washington, D.C. based non-profit, bipartisan organization that most of the goals are promote and preserve Uyghur culture, Uyghur language, religion, they give Uyghur language schools here. But recently, starting 2016, because of the genocide in our homeland, we are focusing on raising awareness about what's going on and also advocate our issues to the US Congress. I would like to share my screen now. Here we go. So you can reach me at elfidar@uiguraa.org if you have any questions at the end. So we will talk about who are the Uyghurs, why China oppresses Uyghur people, and the life of Uyghur people before the camp started, this genocide started, and then the life inside the concentration camp, and then people's life outside the concentration camp, and at the end, what can we do as a regular, citizen for the Uyghur people. So Uyghurs are the Central Asian Turkic people of East Turkestan. The history is like pretty long, from Huns, then Gökturks and Uyghurs, 744. That's when Uyghurs accepted Islam during Karahanlılar with Sultan Saltuk Burhan. We were attacked by Mongolians throughout the history and had our countries, our kingdoms. The most recent one was 1933. That's East Turkestan Islamic Republic. And then 1944, East Turkestan Republic. However, it didn't survive too long because of the outside powers. And we were occupied by China in 1994. And you see where it's strategically located, all the countries, Turkic nations around the Uyghur region. Why China oppresses Uyghurs? Uyghurs, I think the simple answer is because we are not Han Chinese, if you ask me. But China has 1.4 billion population. It's huge, and they need more land for their increasing population. So total area of East Turkestan is pretty big. It's double the Turkey. Double size of Turkey, and the land, our homeland, is very rich in oil and gas and mineral, resources, and the cotton fields. Let me stop here and talk about a little bit about the cotton fields. The world's 20% of cotton comes from China, and China's 80% of cotton comes from our homeland, and it's the best quality, the soft, and because it's handpicked. And then the geopolitical land, because our location is on the Silk Road, and it opens China to West, open China to Europe. So it's very important for their trade, for their business. That's why they want to always control this population, the Uyghurs, in those among the Silk Road. And then assimilated other nations. China did assimilate so many other nations. However, they couldn't assimilate completely Uyghurs, because I believe because of our strong cultural background, and also our religion, because we're Muslims. And but this systematic oppression was always there. When I was born in Urumqi in Xinjiang. We call it East Turkestan. Chinese call Xinjiang because its name is like new territory, basically, because they occupied us recently and added to their map. So in East Turkestan, this oppression was always there, even when I was a child. But it accelerated recently. As you see, I just talked about geopolitical land. China had built lots of pipelines and railroads to access Europe and other part of the world, and also planning to build those new pipelines and railroads in order to make their One Belt, One Road initiatives come true. Operation of Uyghurs before the camp. So as I said, when I was a child, it was still going on. Forced abortion and forced contraceptives was going on. My mom, for example, had to do forced abortion. They just come to your work unknown, just like a drug test here, and round up all the ladies and take them to the doctors and check. And if you're pregnant, with China's policy is 1 child for China. And at that time, it was 2 for the minorities, but you have to do forced abortion if you're pregnant, and if you're not allowed, you're not allowed. Ban on Uyghur language in schools, that started also when I was a child. I was able to have both language, Uyghur and Chinese, but then it changed and they banned our own language from our schools. And ban Uyghur names and Muslim names, the Turkic origin names, like, for example, Fatma, Mohammed, those names are banned. You're not allowed to give those names to your children. And banned practice of religion, of course. This was also when I was a child, when I fast in school, the teachers were against it. They were giving us the water and things like that, and I thought that's normal because I was a child, but it was systematically, even at that time, they were a little strict when it comes to religion. And now it's like totally, 180%, 80 degrees changed. Separation from Turkic and Muslim roots, that's another thing they used to do. There are historical books, a lot of, the white papers, for example, they're trying to say that the Uyghurs don't have strong Muslim or strong Turkic root. They're trying to take us out of those boxes so we don't associate ourselves with our own root. And then the communication to outside China. China has its own intranet. So the Google and YouTube doesn't work there. They have their own version, Baidu and those others. And that's why the people there don't know what's going on around the world. So they're not aware of all the things happening around the world, and even in China, because they don't know what's going on inside. They're not, informed with their media control. Now, life inside the camp. As you see those photo in the bottom, that is one of the cell. They eat there, they sleep there, they take turn to sleep based on the camp survivor Mikrigil Tursun. They're allowed to sleep a couple hours and they have to stand up, and others need to sleep because there is not enough room. They built so many camps. There's so many millions and millions in the camp, and they don't have enough room. So that's how the life in there. With dark room, very small, crowded, a lot of people, and they constantly hear Xi Jinping's political indoctrination, basically. And their restroom are inside the room. It's the bucket you see on the corner. I don't want to go to too much details. We watched some of the videos. So there's political indoctrination, torture, sterilization, gang rapes going on. Besides that, forced labor, I am going to come back to that again at the end. Forced labor is going on, and then organ harvesting. Crematorias are built next to those camps, and Uyghurs are Muslims. They don't believe in to crematory. They're cremate their bodies, but for some reason, the satellite map located the crematorias around those camps, and we know it's because of the organ harvesting. As you see on the top photo, that is at the airport. They have their own line, fast, lane for organ transplant. I mean, it shows the degree of, the organ harvesting business in China, how it's going on. You see it's in Uyghur on the right and the Chinese on the left. Besides that, it's separation of family and children. When both parents are taken to the camps, children are sent to state-run orphanages. So they're in the orphanages when their parents are alive, and they're also being stripped away from their identity, their language, their culture, their religion. We talked about it. And then also those camps are, besides being slave labor, forced labor, they're also testing zones for Chinese medicine and technological tools. Based on the testimonies of those camp survivors, when they enter, they do full DNA check, they cut their hair, and then they go through all those facial technological, tools to see their face, smile, and then speak, voice recognition. All those tests are also being done there. And they are given unknown medicines, after taking those medicines. Some lost their periods, ladies, some lost their conscious, but they're testing those things as well inside the camp. This is just one sample of camp that's you see in Dapenching. It's in Urumqi, the city I was born. It's just one of them, and there is, I believe, 500 to 700 were, the researchers found the camps inside East Turkestan, but this one of them were built. And holds 70,000 people. And imagine what is the the big picture with this. The numbers are, the State Department says 2 million, the Department of Defense says 3 million, and we Uyghurs believe it's much more than that, because there is not exactly number, because China controls all the information. And life outside the camp is also not easy. Uyghurs lives in surveillance state. It's like an open prison, basically. There are cameras everywhere. Everywhere they pass, they need to show ID. The face recognition tells you your family and your, everything is already in the computer. They can see and they can watch you. And besides that, there are also sterilization, forced abortion, forced marriage, because of the one-child policy that China had starting in 1980. They were doing they were doing the abortion to the girls and keeping the men because they want to continue their last name, continue their family, right? Now we had like big proportions imbalance for lots of bachelorette Chinese men, but not enough girls. So the state was setting up those initiatives to bring Han Chinese men to East Turkestan to marry Uyghurs and giving them houses. And a lot of Uyghur girls, unfortunately, they're afraid their parents will be detained to the camps, and they sacrifice themselves and marry Han Chinese. In our culture, we don't marry someone who's not Muslim. We don't marry someone who's, not Uyghur, but unfortunately that's going on there. And then Chinese relative plan, that's the Chinese relative initiatives as well. As you see the photos in the bottom, every house, especially the rural areas and the villages, had to welcome a Chinese person from the Han Chinese cadre to their home. Imagine at night, every night for a month, for 2 months, 3 months, someone staying in your house and they're reporting everything you do. Are you praying? Are you practicing Islam? Are you reading to Xi Jinping's books, And that's the system they built under the name of brothers and sisters, Chinese relative plan. And that is very unbelievable, unacceptable, but it's still going on. And separation of family, we talked about it. Based on Adrian Zen's recent report, 1.6 million Uyghurs were transferred from East Turkestan to inner China to the factories to be used as a forced labor. And also all those, stripping away from your culture identity is same for the people outside the camp. And the birth control, forced sterilization inside and outside. This is one of the charts. As you see, it's a sharp drop. And I just want to bring up, for example, Uyghurs are very close to Uzbeks. And Uzbekistan's population in 1950, it was 6.3 million. And now their population is 35 million, 33.5 million. And let's look at Turkey. Turkey's population in 1950s, it was around 21 millions, and now it's 82 millions. However, based on China's records, Uyghur population was around 9 to 10 million 1950s, and now it's 13 million. That shows that China systematically using every means to reduce our population. And before we were born, basically in the womb, they are doing the genocide right there. We talked about the kids being away. There were some, parents recognized their kids from the orphanage photos. The Xi Jinping himself, recent leaked Xinjiang Papers showed that we thought this camp, this genocide started 2016, but actually it was planned in 2014, the most recent one. So Xi Jinping himself made the order saying, round up all those that needs to be round up. He gave that order. So basically it was coming from the government. It was coming from the top to strike hard on Uyghurs, to break their roots, break their lineage. That's why the children are taken out of their families and sent to kids orphanages, state-run orphanages. Here you see the photos of the traditional Uyghurs houses in Kashgar, in Hulja, in our other cities. Very rich cultural, right? But that's what also China trying to eliminate. They trying to destroy any of those traditional, like old Uyghur cultural houses, and instead making tall buildings and under the name of development and erasing our culture. The life outside for the Uyghurs outside East Turkestan is not easy. We have our loved ones in those camps, and we're hearing all those stories, as I said, and it affects our psychology, it affects our daily life, and we try our best for our children, for our future. We try to raise awareness, trying to stay strong. This guy is one of the example on the left, Yusufjan Ahmed. He was forced to be a spy by Chinese police, and he rejected it. And recently he was shot in Turkey. He is still in the hospital. And the other, techniques that China use is when your passport expires, they don't renew. They said, come to China. Come to China, renew it from the mainland. And when you get there, you end up being in the camps. So that's another, use that China used to bring all the Uyghurs back from overseas. And constantly, I have friends here. I have, since we are all community-based organization, we get lots of calls from the community members. They're getting threatened by the Chinese police through WeChat, through their phones, the phone calls. China trying to keep us be silent. They don't want us to talk about those things. They hold our loved one as a hostage and trying to silence our here. And we're afraid. A lot of us afraid. We cannot ask a simple question of where is my father, where is my mother, where is my family, because we're afraid of China's retaliation. And that's most of my friends' destiny here, unfortunately. As you see, the Uyghur Human Rights Project did some research and brought this report out, and between 2016 2015 till now, around 10,000 mosques or the religious faith sites were destroyed. And unfortunately, I mean, when you see this is almost nothing when they are destroying us, destroying our hopes, destroying our youth, destroying our future. It's hard to accept, but that's what's going on, basically. So for the forced labor, before I want to talk about a little bit and then see what can we do for the Uyghur causes. At the beginning of the camp, China, arrested, detained all the backbone of our society, our professors, our doctors, our teachers, our, scholars. And then they start, arresting all other regular citizens. And they want to control very hard. And at the beginning, we thought they want to just destroy us, but actually they're selling us piece by piece. They're treating us like a products. If you notice, last year in New York, CBP seized 13 tons of hair made by the prisoners, made by of those concentration camp detainees. And that's a lot. When they enter, they cut their hair, and there we go. They use that as a product and sell and make money, besides the organ harvesting also. And recently, couple years, they're building factories inside those camps. Therefore, they're using Uyghurs as a slave labor. And it's unbelievable here in US, most American citizens, or like you and I, we may not know. I might be wearing a sweater, cotton sweater made by my cousin. You might be wearing a shoes made by someone else's mom. And those are made by blood and tears of our loved ones, our people. That's why we need to do something. China is not responding any human rights abuses, any condemnations, but what they will respond that we believe when it hits their pocket, when it's hits economically. So therefore, there is one thing we can do is boycott Chinese product. And how we can do that is very simple. So let's go to what can we do. First, we said raise awareness, talk to people, tell them what's going on to Uyghur people. We are the Turkic Muslim nation that had long history, but right now facing to genocide. Tell your relatives, friends, and then support Uyghur organization. There is many Uyghur organization in the US, like UAA, like UHRP or others. You can donate them if you want to support the cause, and contact your Congress members and advocate for the Uyghur bills. And that's where we need help from you guys, each one of you guys. Right now, Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which is HR 1155, and the Senate version is S65. And also another bill, Uyghur Human Rights Protection Act. They are at the Hill. There are other bills too, under the Eagle bill, under NDAA bill, but those are the main ones that I wanted to focus today. That the forced labor bill that has to pass. This bill bans the forced labor made product in Xinjiang to enter US. And that is least we can do. When we can make changes, then China will start thinking to change their strategy, we understand they're not going to close those camps right away next day, but step by step, you and I, we are together can make some changes. What we really like is each one of you call your House representatives, call your senators. You can just Google, enter your address, or you can contact us. We can provide you what you need, and tell them you heard about Uyghur genocide and you want to support those Uyghurs, and you don't want to buy products made by Uyghur forced labor. And that's what will be great help for us. Thank you so much, and I will take any questions at the end, I believe, if you have any.
Yeah, thank you very much for your impassioned presentation to us, Elfidar. This is horrifying, absolutely. And we appreciate the ideas that you gave us for how we might be able to respond. And as you said, we will be taking questions at the end. Those of you on Zoom, please put your questions into chat, and we'll respond to them at that time. So thank you again. And now we'd like to invite Yonah Diamond to join us. Yonah is the legal counsel at the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, located in Montreal, Canada. He obtained a bachelor's degree in political science from McGill University, then graduated from Cardozo Law School in 2016 with a double concentration in international and comparative law and criminal law and procedure. Yonah engages in legal, political, and public relations advocacy for the release of political prisoners and in support of human rights and atrocity prevention. He has published widely on human rights, peace and reconciliation, and international justice, including in Foreign Policy Magazine, The Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, National Post, The Hill, and Open Canada. He has worked with a variety of human rights organizations, including Oxfam America, the Innocence Project, Human Rights Watch, and the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. Yonah is also the principal author of the independent expert report, The Uyghur Genocide, an examination of China's breaches of the Genocide Convention. Yonah, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing your presentation.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And it was very nice to hear Elfidar's illuminating presentation. So a little bit of my background. Thanks for the kind introduction. In May of last year, I was introduced to Reyhan Assad, who's an Uyghur lawyer, human rights advocate, who has been championing the cause of her brother, Ekpar Assad, who has disappeared into the camps and has been held in solitary confinement. And so Reyhan and I became friends, and we collaborated on a petition to the UN. We published a foreign policy article in July arguing that what is happening to the Uyghurs constitutes genocide. And as a result, I was approached in the fall of last year to serve as the principal author of the independent report that Bob mentioned, the Uyghur Genocide, an examination of China's breaches of the Genocide Convention, which was jointly published by our Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights and the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy. The report was a result of a pro bono collaboration of over 50 independent experts from around the world with a range of relevant expertise, including on China's ethnic policies, the Uyghur region, international law, and genocide. And our report analyzed whether China has breached the Genocide Convention and concludes that China is responsible for genocide against the Uyghurs as a group, including all genocidal acts under Article 2. The report is based on direct evidence, including eyewitness testimony and internal government documents, statistics, and reliable satellite imagery analyses. I later testified before the Uyghur Tribunal at the second set of hearings in September of this year on our findings. And the tribunal is about to release its judgment on the crimes committed against the Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims. So I encourage everyone to keep a lookout for the judgment that will be released this week, which will be another opportunity, in addition to the Beijing Olympics, to amplify advocacy and seek justice for the Uyghurs. Government officials, so the Uyghur Tribunal will come out with an impartial judgment. And there's a need for such an impartial People's Tribunal because there is right now that there's no possibility to try China before an international court or to take high-level officials before the International Criminal Court. China doesn't recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC. It's not a party. It doesn't recognize the International Court of Justice, and has been blocking efforts by the UN to access the region. So the responsibility falls on the international community now to act. And government officials often wrongly assume that states must wait for some international court to determine whether genocide is being committed. But that's simply incorrect. And these obstacles to trying China before an international court, largely because of its standing as a global superpower, does not render the Genocide Convention, a multilateral treaty that's binding on 151 other states parties, including China, inapplicable, nor does it make the ongoing state violence against the Uyghurs and Turkic Muslims any less urgent. While parallels can be drawn between the Uyghur genocide and historical genocides, I will focus on the legal definition and the unprecedented nature of this genocide. Can you, oh, great. So the Genocide Convention imposes, as the title suggests, a duty to prevent and punish the crime. This includes taking effective countermeasures to respond, seek justice, and halt the genocide. The framework that we used in our analysis was a state responsibility one. In other words, whether the CCP, the Communist Party of China, bears responsibility, rather than a few individuals. People also often assume that justice and accountability can only be secured by going after the specific individuals responsible. While this is an important element of accountability, it's not the only form of justice. And so to understand how a genocide can be perpetrated in 2021, it's important to understand the repressive and sophisticated system in the region, which is sustained by a complex hierarchy of government bodies, officials, and even artificial intelligence, which has taken on a life of its own. There are now highly classified documents that have been leaked, including the Xinjiang Papers, which give a particularly high-level inside look at how the system was set in motion by President Xi Jinping himself, and how it's reinforced by officials along the ladder, including the orders that the state must achieve the, quote, 4 breaks, break their lineage, their roots, break their connections, break their origins. This leak constitutes the first time that material with top secret statements has been made by a Chinese head of state have been leaked to the public. As one scholar who reviewed these papers, David Tobin, explained of the message sent by Xi Jinping, quote, "It's not an ideology for you to study or to ponder. It's an order. You can't resist or object." So despite some of the challenges to accessing the region, we now have mountains of evidence of the mass atrocities, which are increasing by the day. The Xinjiang Papers are the most classified set of leaked documents among a number of other leaks, including the China cables, the leaked lists of thousands of detainees, police documents, including a 52 gigabyte internal police data set obtained by The Intercept, which contains close to 250 million rows of data, which make up tens of thousands of police files. These are still being surveyed and studied. And these documents are often corroborated by state media and other official documents. The Xinjiang Victim Database is a website which is another indispensable platform that documents detailed victim testimonies, stories, and detention sites with the goal of bringing as much transparency to the region as possible. And to quote, both protect victims now and hold Chinese authorities accountable later by creating foundations for future legal action and reparations. These accounts are painstaking and very detailed. I've watched it grow from the thousands to the tens of thousands in a matter of a year. And so I always encourage people in the audience to donate to the Xinjiang Victim Database, amongst other NGOs working on these causes, as they largely operate voluntarily, and we know that there are millions of stories to be documented. So what distinguishes genocide as an international crime is the end goal is the destruction of a group entity, in whole or in part. The Genocide Convention's preamble on the slide refers to a resolution which first recognized the crime of genocide by the UN as the, quote, denial of the right of existence of entire human groups, in bold. The terms of the Genocide Convention must be read on their own and in light of the treaty's purpose, which is to prevent genocide and safeguard the existence of entire human groups. The next slide, please. So under Article 2, which contains the definition of genocide, genocide means any of these 5 acts committed with the requisite intent to destroy in whole or in part a group as such. So genocide can be committed, for instance, through forcibly transferring children of the group to another group alone, if it's committed with the intent to destroy the group, or by causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group with the intent to destroy the group, neither of which necessarily entail physical destruction of group members. Under international law, group destruction also means destruction of the social unit in all its characteristics. So these acts listed, any one of these acts should be seen as the methods of carrying out genocide. These are illustrative acts of how to carry out a genocide, and China is perpetrating every single one of them, most of them on a systematic scale against the Uyghurs. So China's purported counterterrorism goals behind its crackdown don't determine the state's intent to destroy. Its destructive, its objective system of destruction against the Uyghurs does. So the intent to destroy is measured by objective standards, including the state orchestrated destructive campaigns, which target every single aspect of the Uyghurs as a group, and which, when viewed as a whole, can only amount to an intent to destroy the group as such. So these destructive campaigns must also be viewed as a process, mirroring other genocides, starting with dehumanization, stripping of an identity, burning religious materials, criminalizing religious practices, including, as Elfidar mentioned, names and clothing and even beards. I'll go through now the major destructive campaigns in somewhat chronological order, which evidence the intent to destroy the Uyghurs as a group. And then I'll follow up with some action items, largely mirroring what Elfidar has already recommended. Next slide. So the Uyghur region has become the most dystopian police state in the world, with an all-encompassing mass surveillance system operated by police, Han cadres, and artificial intelligence at every corner, which has terrorized Uyghurs throughout the region and broken up entire families and communal bonds. Outside the concentration camps, millions of Chinese Han cadres have been sent to live with Uyghur families, invading the most intimate of spaces, including their beds. These Uyghur homes are often already missing men to the camps, so this results in sexual abuse of Uyghur women. The state has also banned and is erasing Uyghur language, culture, religion, history, literature, and poetry. The state has destroyed, as Elfidar mentioned, and damaged the vast majority of Xinjiang mosques, approximately 16,000 according to reliable satellite imagery analyses, and the majority of sacred sites, including sites at the heart of Uyghur identity, like Ordam Padshah, or what is widely considered the holiest Uyghur site. Why would the authorities go to the middle of the sand dunes to remove these markers, areas which serve no economic purpose or other purpose, because they know that's the heart of Uyghur identity, and therefore destroy that specifically along with Uyghur connection to the land. Many remaining sacred sites have been converted into commercial or civic spaces or enclosed with walls or checkpoints. These destructive practices extend into domestic private Uyghur spaces intended to transform, quote, backward Uyghur lifestyles and erase ethnically distinct Uyghur architecture, including the destruction of household features at the center of Uyghur domestic and sacred life. The practices connected to these destroyed or converted sacred sites and household features not only carry a religious significance for the Uyghurs, but also strike at essential elements of Uyghur identity, culture, communal bonds, and connection with the land. The mass internment campaign, of course, has further torn Uyghur families and communities apart through rounding up Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims in the estimated millions, as was mentioned. According to leaked documents and former detainees, grounds for detention were often for who they are, charges that criminalize an entire ethnicity, where being, quote, ethnic Uyghur is an official factor which could result in detention and harsher prison conditions. The vast majority of these detainees are Uyghur men between the ages of 18 and 55, and the government is also subjecting Uyghurs to a parallel, unprecedented system of long-term forced labor programs. Neither the mass internment or forced labor programs show any signs of slowing down. Recent reports demonstrate that Uyghurs are increasingly being transferred to formal prisons, confirming a concerted plan to render the internment campaign more permanent with a veneer of legitimacy. The CCP is simultaneously engaged in a well-documented, systematic, forcible birth prevention campaign targeting Uyghurs, which is outwardly linked with the mass internment drive, even describing them in the same terms, quote, strike hard campaigns, which were both planned at high-level meetings. According to a leaked Caracas list, where Uyghurs comprise 80% of the population, the two most cited reasons by far for detention or internment are birth policy violations or persons born after the 80s, 90s, or 2000s. So these two principal reasons for detention and the fact that the vast majority of detainees are Uyghur men of childbearing years or childbearing age, reveal that the mass internment campaign and forcible birth prevention programs, they reinforce each other through a strict birth policy rules or by detaining young or middle-aged people. So the authorities forcibly impose birth prevention measures on Uyghurs like mass sterilization and IUDs through the ever-present threat of detention or other penalties, and further erode Uyghur communal bonds by incentivizing reporting on one another about illegal births with cash rewards. Officials are further required to subject women to regular pregnancy checks, as Elfidar mentioned, and pregnant women are forced to undergo abortions upon internment or if deemed illegal by the state. By 2019, the government planned to subject over 80% of women of childbearing age in the southern four prefectures to sterilizations or to IUDs. And these southern areas are significant because that's where the Uyghurs make up approximately 90% of the population. And the available data shows that these campaigns are effective in drastically driving down Uyghur birth rates. In 2018, Xinjiang, or the Uyghur region, had the highest net IUD placements of any region in China, despite making up 1.8% of China's total population. An August 2020 report from a majority Uyghur area noted that 88% of all childbearing women have already been subjected to IUDs or sterilization. Between 2017 and 2019, the birth rate across Xinjiang dropped by nearly half, the most extreme drop out of any region in the world since 1950, with greater decreases in Uyghur areas. And the same downward trend in Uyghur births is seen in areas that are majority Han, further north. Available data for 2019 to 2020 show that these decreases are continuing, with southern Xinjiang's growth rates already near or below zero, at a time when China is encouraging childbirths across the country to fend off a national crisis, all demonstrating a clear discriminatory program suppressing Uyghur births in the region. The government does not even dispute the decline in birth rates, but instead attributes them to the, quote, comprehensive implementation of the family planning policy. These birth rates will only continue to drop so long as the draconian coercive birth prevention measures, mass internment, and forced labor schemes remain in place. The combined mass internment and coercive birth prevention campaigns deprive the Uyghur population of its ability to reproduce. The state has also forcibly transferred Uyghur children, as was mentioned, en masse into state-run Han group settings in breach of Article 2E of transferring children of the group to another group, which further evidences an intent to destroy the group by tearing families apart with the express goal of preventing the transmission of Uyghur traditions, religion, culture, or language, essentially cutting off the next generation of Uyghurs. The CCP is selectively targeting prominent Uyghur community leaders, as was mentioned, and the guardians of Uyghur identity to harsher prison and even death sentences or disappearances. There's a growing list of disappeared or imprisoned Uyghur intellectuals from 2016 to the present, including government officials, academics, celebrated prominent writers, poets, linguists, tech developers, and the like. So the state is committing all of these independent but interconnected destructive campaigns, which attack every possible aspect of what defines the Uyghur survival as a group. The forcible reduction of Uyghur births, severance of all Uyghur social bonds, mass internment characterized by widespread torture and sexual violence, disappearance of Uyghur community leaders, household heads, and intellectuals, the eradication of communal, spiritual, and religious Uyghur sites and rituals, erasure of Uyghur language and heritage, and the forcible transfer of the next generation of Uyghur children from their homes to be raised in Han settings by the state. These policies and their destructive impact on the Uyghurs evidence an intent to destroy the Uyghurs as a group. China, as was mentioned by Bob, you can move to the next slide, please. Thanks. So China has thus far blocked, as was mentioned, any independent, unfettered access to the region, and yet was elected to a 3-year term on the Human Rights Council, one of the key bodies empowered with initiating fact-finding missions. So China not only refuses to cooperate and block international cooperation and investigation, but is increasingly hiding and concealing and destroying evidence within its territory and control. China is, of course, engaged in a far more aggressive campaign to conceal its evidence within its borders, but is also engaged in a disinformation campaign abroad. The China cable is one of the leaked sets of documents contain a blueprint for the mass internment system known as the Telegram, which has an entire section devoted to strict secrecy, which bans all mobile phones and cameras in the facilities, and has a directive to train staff to maintain secrecy over important data, which are not to be disseminated nor open to the public. Some may have seen recently a courageous Chinese citizen took some videos of the concentration camps at the greatest risk to his life, but is obviously a very rare occurrence. In addition to all the satellite imagery analyses that we have. And former detainees have been also forced to sign documents never to disclose their experiences in the internment camps on penalty of them and their family members being sent back. They're coached on what to say upon release, including to deny they were ever in detention. And they're forced to appear in videos portraying internment and the party in a positive light. Over the past couple of years, Chinese authorities have scrubbed and omitted certain critical data from the region from public record, which is a departure from long-standing tradition of public documentation by the state, including birth rate, population breakdown, birth control, and prison information, and has even burned documents related to internment, which tends to occur following the major leak of documents. For example, according to one cadre, in the aftermath of the release of the China cables, quote, "It took 5 to 6 days to burn everything in the office." The government has also expelled an unprecedented number of foreign journalists, at least 20, and 56 foreign correspondent positions remain unfilled since 2020 due to expulsions and visa delays. And China continues to harass and monitor or chaperone the few journalists or outside observers who are granted very limited access, and as I said, chaperoned access to the region. And all these restrictive conditions were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So China's CCP's disinformation and propaganda campaign is an attempt to project its own reality to the world and to prevent us from engaging with the truth. The leaked Xinjiang Papers further exposed Xi Jinping's anticipation of the need for a propaganda campaign to counter outside criticism. As far back as 2014, he stated as an order, quote, "Don't be afraid if hostile forces whine or if hostile forces malign the image of Xinjiang." So this propaganda campaign is multi-pronged, ranging in severity from blocking international access or only allowing these chaperoned visits, to airing forced video confessions, to state-run press conferences with bizarre titles like "Xinjiang is a wonderful land," and to daily state-run media articles and daily statements on social media by diplomats and trolls. One of the most disturbing such public statements was issued by China's US embassy, outwardly admitting that the anti-extremism policies in Xinjiang made, quote, "Uyghur women no longer baby-making machines." These largely poorly online orchestrated campaigns are targeted at the international community, since platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube are banned in China. And luckily, Twitter just suspended thousands of these fake false accounts, but the threats to undermining international discourse are still very real. And more sinister, there are even some academics who might defend China's policy in the region due to either the status they're offered in China or perhaps to preserve climate cooperation with China. So the final slide. So these are just a few action items I put together, but of course, we need to get creative and do everything we can to stop a genocide. With the Beijing Olympics coming up in February, it's a good opportunity to undertake initiatives that as a marker and important event to amplify efforts. Listen to the victims and amplify Uyghur voices is I find really critical, of course, important. And we need to build coalitions. We need to reach out to our networks, to see what we can do together, because this is an issue that is impacting all of us, humanity at large, and imposes responsibilities on us. Public protests and demonstrations are really powerful. Individuals can adopt or champion a specific disappeared or detained family's cause. The Xinjiang Victim Database can offer, tens of thousands of well-documented cases, and speak to Uyghurs in the community about whether you can help share their stories. And we need to hold businesses accountable. And as Elfidar mentioned, the political action, like laws to prevent goods made with forced Uyghur labor from entering our markets, and to fast track Uyghur refugees, around the world who fear being sent back to China. But we really need to get creative with how we respond. And this needs to be kind of at top of mind all the time because it's ongoing. So thank you for giving me the chance to speak, and I look forward to the Q&A as well.
Thank you so very much, Yonah, for bringing us your in-depth knowledge of this situation. We would invite people for questions. I have a few that have come in at this point through the chat, and we'll also invite those in our audience to share questions. Since I have some from chat, I will share with you, and also we certainly welcome Elfidar back into the conversation as well, if she wishes to respond to questions. One that you kind of brought up on your last slide was regarding the 2022 Olympics. happening in Beijing, and just wondering if you might expand a little bit on actions that could be taken.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, that's a great question. This is where I think we need to press politicians, we know business leaders, we know, to withdraw support from the Beijing Olympics and support a boycott. I mean, this is really not a very challenging ask either. If we know anyone, or if you know anyone who's influential in these kind of circles, or to just attend public protests as we approach the date. Getting athletes to make statements. I know Enes Kanter, the NBA player, has been very vocal, one of the few, and the Women's Tennis Association, but all sports organizations and any stakeholder that is connected to the Beijing Olympics should be pressed to respond to at least, why are you attending an Olympics held by a government that is committing genocide? I mean, that's a very simple ask, and it's not only the genocide against the Uyghurs, it's all activists or all persecuted peoples in China understand that these are not games that can go on as planned. And so, there's already a huge momentum for this. And so it's really just about tapping into those already engaged in these efforts. And I think basically all human rights organizations in some form are engaged in this. So I encourage you to look out for opportunities to take part in it and encourage others to do so.
Thank you, Yonah. That's useful. Is there anyone in the audience here who has a question at this moment? I will continue then with a few other questions that we have from our online audience. Are there particular U.S. corporations that import products made in Uyghur detention centers that we should avoid doing business with? Where might we find this information?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. There's a group called the Coalition to End Forced Labor in the Uyghur region. End Uyghur Forced Labor, I believe they have a website. It's challenging though, but as Elfidar mentioned, 20% of the world's cotton comes from Xinjiang. And so we know that there's a presumption on many products coming from the region are likely produced with forced labor, especially in certain industries like the cotton, polysilicon, there's a bunch of other industries that are largely affected by this kind of labor. But the garment industry, to me, is like an obvious one. And so a lot of, basically, this virtually affects the entire fashion industry, apparel industry. So, but there are organizations that are, compiling these statistics. And yeah, if Elfidar wants to add to this, I'm happy to hear.
I apologize. I couldn't hear the question. Do you mind repeating one more time?
You wanted the question again. The question was, are there particular U.S. corporations that import products made in Uyghur detention centers that we should avoid doing business with, and where might we find this information?
Sure. So we are in the steering committee of Coalition to End the Uyghur Forced Labor. I can send the link. You can just Google it, Coalition to End Uyghur Forced Labor. And you will see the list of all the companies, all the textile companies and electronic companies, solar, all the list over there. Just to name a couple of them, Nike is one of them, and we know that they did advocate against the Uyghur forced labor bill. And Apple is one of them. Zara from textile is one of them. You will see the list in that website. I need to be clear here. What they are saying is, let's do the third-party research and interviews to show that our products, our supply chain is not made with forced labor. But Uyghurs are telling that it's very almost impossible to do the independent research in China, because people here on US soil, they can't tell the truth. They're afraid to tell the truth, afraid of Chinese government's retaliation. The Uyghurs in those camps will not share the truth. They will not be able to share. That's why the research, the third-party independent research is not going to work. That's why we need to pass this bill. So when it's banned, it's going to make some tangible actions, basically.
Yeah. Can I add one thing?
Great. Thank you very much, Elfidar. We have another question. Pardon? Oh, Yonah, you wanted to add to that?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add that, as Elfidar mentioned, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act creates this presumption that goods made in whole or in part in the region are tainted by forced labor. And so this has been unanimously approved by both Congress and the Senate, but there's some talk that the administration is preventing it from being passed. It's already been almost 2 years that it's been first introduced in early 2020, and it's kind of shamefully been languishing without being passed. So something to pressure our government to move forward on. And it's not only forced labor, but there's also Airbnb has also recently been implicated in hosting properties on land that is owned by the Xinjiang construction court, which is a colonial XPCC, it's called, which is it's been sanctioned by the US. So there are a lot of companies that are still complicit in violating US's own sanctions. So these are also things that businesses by US law are
Yonah, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me? Whoops. Can you hear me? Sorry. Oh, yeah, no, I was just saying that some businesses are even violating US law, like Airbnb, by engaging with entities that are already sanctioned by the US in the region.
I just remembered to add one more thing, that the US administration, current administration, and John Kerry, basically the climate people were arguing that we do need those, the US depends on China's solar panels for clean energy. And I don't know if you guys heard of the recent Washington Post articles. The solar panel, polysilicon is made by forced labor. It's already been reported. Those solar panels are yesterday's solar panels. It was 10 years ago's quality. China burns coal to make those solar panels. So there is nothing clean about that energy. It's still making our earth dirty. Besides, it's made with forced labor, with tinted, the tears and bloods of our brothers and sisters, our loved ones. So I don't understand how would we feel comfortable buying those products, using it and thinking it's clean energy. There is nothing clean about it.
you say it again?
I'm sorry, you probably didn't hear my question. I'll repeat it. What has been the response from the Islamic world to these abuses, particularly the leadership in Islamic countries?
Let me share what I know, and then Yonah can share his view.
Yes,
unfortunately, we are thankful a lot of Muslim countries are, showing some actions, trying to reach out. However, it's not enough. We're not getting enough attention from the Muslim world. Some of the countries, such as Pakistan and other countries, are actually blaming us to continue US propaganda, when the reality is there is actual genocide going on, and they're saying it's exaggeration, it's China's own inside politics, or it's the US and the West is for their own intention, they are bringing up this issue. That's the reactions we get, unfortunately. However, I think the regular citizens, once they know, they do feel sorry about what's going on, and they reach out to us to help, and try to find a ways to help to stop this genocide.
thank you. Yonah, is there anything you would like to add?
Oh, no, I mean, that seems to cover it. I thought it was very powerful to see Muslim communities come out to protest in the UK recently. So so it's empowering to see things like that, but unfortunately, some silence from leaders in the Muslim world.
Thank you both. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? We have a question here. Yes.
For Yonah. So thanks for the research and the area effort that you've done for us. So the one more question is, like, how many countries around the world using your report as their base to declare genocide in Oslo? And the other countries, except I know a couple of them now is US and European Congress. I would like to know any more countries on board on this, or there's any other countries that are standing by other side of this history, which is standing with Chinese government to blame us for what's happening.
Could you hear the question, Yonah? I can repeat it. How many countries are using your report to base their reaction to genocide in China and to declare that it is genocide? And he mentioned that he knows of some in the European Union, would like to know about more. Is he muted or? Or am I muted? Are you?
Okay. Can you speak to
Are you muted?
Oh, sorry. I'll leave myself on unmute now because,
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good question. It's not one I can exactly answer because we're not told whether or not states have based their determination on our report. But there are parliaments around the world that have recognized the genocide. UK, Canada, Lithuania, Belgium. If I'm missing any, Elfidar, maybe the point of the report really is to provide governments with an independent expert analysis so that they can take their responsibility under the Genocide Convention to both come to their own determination and then act on it and prevent and halt the genocide. And so now this week, the Uyghur Tribunal will also release its independent and impartial judgment as to whether genocide and other crimes are being committed. And so that will provide another independent basis for governments to act.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, related to this is another question on how are Xi Jinping's actions any different from those of Slobodan Milosevic? And if his actions stoop to the same level, is he deserving of the same fate?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So for me, I don't think it's so helpful to engage in these kind of comparisons because the system that President Xi has set in motion is really quite unprecedented in a lot of ways, and in both the structure of the Chinese nation state, in how it's so solidified and coming from the top. You know, certain orders have to be carried out throughout the hierarchy, and I don't know if it's exactly the same. I'm not an expert on the atrocities under Milosevic, but I can say that this has to be approached with a new approach. And I think it's also problematic sometimes to focus on like the individual bad guy or bad woman, because that's not always helpful in terms of stopping a genocide, right? It's so there's so many officials that are upholding this system, and it's impossible to bring President Xi, let's say, before any court right now. So it's not really useful for in terms of international legal remedies to think about going after one bad person, because this system, like I said, has kind of taken on a life of its own as well. And we need really concrete action that confronts the genocide of this scale, going beyond just targeting individual leaders, because while they bear the most responsibility, it's still important to respond to the Communist Party's entity as a state, and how states engage with the CCP. If that makes sense. That's a good question, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Good insight. Appreciate that. I have a question out here. Yes. Okay. Shia and Sunni and Shia, thank you. We have a question about, and I don't know if either of you, is the Uyghur area, is that primarily Shia or, I'm sorry, I'm Sunni, and I should know that. And does that have any influence on international response?
Based on what I know, when I was in China, I knew a little bit of our religion, but I didn't know there's two groups, Shias and Sunnis. I thought all Muslims are just like Muslims. I learned that when I came to Turkey, that there's a difference. And most Uyghurs are Sunnis. That's how, when they accepted Islam. Do we have a different support from the international other countries? No, because of China's strict control, we don't get any support. But in diaspora, I think similar, both sides, we don't differentiate, as I said. But Xi Jinping himself in China, the Chinese government treats religion as a disease. So they don't accept any kind. Even Falun Gongs are not acceptable for them, you know. So, I mean, it's Xi Jinping's his own words, break their roots, break the lineage, absolutely no mercy. So they want to just erase Islam, erase Uyghur identity, erase Uyghur culture.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I got to turn my phone back on here where my questions are. For Professor Diamond, what are the moral implications of U.S. universities collaborating with Chinese universities, all of which are heavily state-controlled? And what would you advise U.S. universities in the realm of engagement with Chinese universities? You're still muted, so we're trying to fix that.
Sorry. I'm actually not a professor, so it's challenging for me to address the academic cooperation with other Chinese universities. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer. I know that there are on campuses in the US, there are certain challenges to speaking freely on these issues and censorship that I believe is a part of this coordinated campaign, but it's not really something that's part of my expertise. So.
Just based on what I know, as Yonah said, there are some concerns. Some universities, they canceled our events when we have, raise awareness events. So we think the Chinese government has hand on that. And the Chinese Confucius Institutes, it's basically Chinese government control organization that is in a lot of US universities and US schools, trying to tell the stories from their side. However, some of them were closed. I believe one in Boston is closed, and we are continuing to share the truth about those Confucius Institutes, and we are seeing some actions in there too.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions from our room? I have another one online then, also for Elfidar. Are there many Uyghur refugees in the US? Wondering where they may typically settle, and are they supported by those communities in trying to keep their culture and language?
Based on 2015's, I believe, census, there are around 10,000 Uyghurs in the DMV areas in the US. So we don't have exactly numbers, but there are a lot. We do support each other. For example, in here, I am in Fairfax, Virginia Uyghur School. Every Sunday here, Uyghur language being taught, and then religion, Islam classes are here too. They're being taught, and then Uyghur cultural, like the dutar instruments, and the Uyghur music and dance classes are being taught here. I believe in California, there are also Uyghur community, and they have the similar thing. But other states, not many Uyghurs living there, except some students and, some Uyghurs are working there. We try to, since it's forbidden in our homeland, we try to continue our cultural events for our kids so they would know their language, their culture, their religion better.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I think you covered this, but there is a question of, there have been reports in the media about organ trade derived from Uyghur genocide victims. Has this been verified? And if so, are there such practices covered by the UN Genocide Convention?
Is this for me or for Elfidar?
Either would be. Yonah, if you're ready, go ahead.
I know the UN has documented patterns of organ harvesting against Uyghurs and Falun Gong practitioners. Although I'm not so familiar with this practice, and I think Elfidar might have a little more information, but I mean, under the Genocide Convention, of course, this constitutes a form of inflicting, physical and mental harm, and conditions of life that contribute to potentially a slow death. So, yeah, certainly would fall under the acts, genocidal acts, if when committed in the concentration camps.
In those concentration camps I mentioned, before they got in, they do full check, DNA check, X-rays, and get all the information. And based on the reports we got, China used latest technology, the most expensive machines to do that. Why do they need those expensive $1 million machine for detainees? It explains only that they need those organs. They are creating revenue out of it. That's why it's worth investing, and that's why they're using those expensive machines. So there is a doctor in England, Anwar. He worked himself as an organ harvester doctor, and faced too many gave many testimonies to the governments. So I already talked about the crematoria built around the camps. So China is being smart that they're burning the body, so you can't have the head counts of how many people died, to prove the genocide, how many people were killed. That's one of them. Second, I would like to mention, since this is a more like Muslim communities are here, China advertise their own website, Baidu, to Saudi Arabia for halal organs, because Muslims believe that they need clean body. Like we are Muslims, Uyghurs, we don't eat pork, we practice, so we are considered, our body parts are clean. So China advertised that to Islamic countries that they have halal organs. So those people from Saudi Arabia can come, match their DNA in 24 to 48 hours, get their organs, and sometimes it might be live person that they choose and get the organs. Unfortunately, this is not something secret. It was, talked about it before, and it's related to forced organ harvesting.
Oh, thank you. Question here. One more question. Someone heard that Volkswagen has a large car factory in the Uyghur region, and are they, and wondering if they are using Uyghur slave labor. Do either of you know?
Yes, Volkswagen was in one of those lists that we have that has factories in Xinjiang, and they didn't give enough, good, clear statements yet. They said they will look into it, they will research. However, we believe they do use forced labor. And that's why we here in DC had many demonstrations in front of Volkswagen stores. And in Boston, the Uyghur community members in Boston also had, multiple demonstration in front of the Volkswagen stores. However, we don't have, we had the general manager came out and talked to us, but there is no immediate, tangible action from them.
Thank you. Thank you. Should we continue or? Okay. Elfidar and Yonah, I want to thank you so very much for enlightening us and just the pain that we have brought to our awareness, and hopefully we can find ways that we will take action. You've offered us ways of doing that, so we're so grateful for your presentations. I also want to thank the Islamic Center for allowing us to hold this event here. I want to thank Tassin for arranging for that. I especially want to thank Hakan. He has pulled this program together and brought us these amazing speakers. And I'm so grateful for that. Also, our tech wizard as well. And so doing multiple duties. I also want to thank others on the planning team and thank you for your efforts. This was a difficult topic and also made it hard to pull together in some ways because of that. And I feel shaken as I walk out of here. I thank you for what you've shared, and we'll hope and pray that we can make progress and overcome this in a fair time. Thank you so very much. Thank you everyone for being here, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.